So PBS and NPR are in trouble. Back in 1967, when the Congress decided to fund these programs, they said that non-commercial TV and radio for instructional, educational, and cultural purposes were in the public's interest. But I don't think they believe that anymore. In the middle of the night, the Senate passed a bill that completely defunded PBS and NPR. This will be the first time that the Corporation for Public Broadcasting budget has been zeroed out since 1967. By the way, this is when the TVs were black and white. Now, they are doing this because PBS and NPR stand on the right side of history. They tell the news like the news is supposed to be. They are not sycophants and apologists for fascism and racism and sexism and bigotry the way that Bone Spurs and all of his cult followers want them to be. And because of that, because they give true education and normalize cultural norms that should just be a given in 2025, Bone Spurs and Republicans in the House and Senate have been really going after them and targeting them. They only have $1.1 billion to last them for the next 2 years, but there's already reporting saying that this money is going to start to run out in the fall. Now, PBS and NPR in more populated areas in larger cities, aka Democratic or blue districts most of the time, they have federal funding, but that is not their only source of income. So yes, they'll have to make really steep cuts like layoffs and things like that. In San Francisco, they might have to lay off as many as 15% of their workforce. But in places like New York, which is pretty much the headquarters, I think, they are going to be looking at other sources of revenue and ways that they can keep going without federal funding. Now, this is going to happen a lot in other larger areas that tend to lean more Democratic. Now, the people who are really going to suffer from this are people in rural areas, especially rural areas in red states. You know, the people who voted for this. Now, people might be wondering, well, so what? The educational PBS shows are not going to be there. They were indoctrinating our kids anyway, is what some of those rural people might actually say. But they don't realize that PBS and the smaller news stations in those rural areas run by PBS and NPR, that is how they get their emergency alerts. So in a time where we are already dealing with slow emergency alerts, Texas, I'm looking at you, it's going to become even worse, especially for people in rural areas. You're not going to know what's coming when it's coming because the service that told you what was coming has now been completely defunded by the government. So if you're in a rural area and there's a tornado heading your way, you won't know about it until it's in your living room. As we know, these red states, especially red states that have a lot of rural areas with people who vote Republican habitually, they are the biggest leechers of the government. The ones who think that black people are leeching off of the government all the time because anytime they think black people, they think welfare. They are the main ones taking government subsidies. So now that they're not going to get any federal funding for these local news stations in their area, these local news stations will have to cut programs, lay off staff, and maybe even close altogether. As I said, that is really dangerous if you live in an area that is being affected more and more by climate change. But there is something else as well that this is going to do that I really want to bring some light to. And it starts with education. Like I said, when they created non-commercial programming, they did it for instructional, educational, and cultural reasons. Now that people are angry at the diversity of people, they are targeting education, and they don't want you to have any type of critical thinking. They are now targeting programs that provide that for you and your kids. One of the biggest things that PBS has done was teach children that diversity is a good thing. They taught children that it's okay if white kids and black kids and Asian kids and Hispanic kids all commingle together and become friends. They taught us how to treat one another, educating us on how to be good people and to see everyone as people. The current regime right now do not want you to see people as people. As these ICE raids continue and the attacks on minorities in this country begin to ramp up, they want to tell you how to feel about that. They want to be able to tell you that that's a good thing, that these people somehow deserve it because their skin is brown or a darker shade than you. They are somehow not as human as you are. They don't want your children growing up thinking that everyone is equal. So they are taking those programmings away now. And even though it's not going to affect many of the blue states that don't take federal funding, that can figure out how to keep going even without federal funding, in the red states where they really want to indoctrinate their people, where they're going to start asking questions about why so many people are unaliving because they're not getting alerts quickly enough. Why is it that the hospital down the street is closing down? Why is it that their children are not learning in schools? They want to be able to run the narrative and tell you what they want you to think. And they don't want you to be smart enough to understand that you are being lied to. That is why this is happening. Bone Spurs is saying that PBS and NPR are biased. It's nothing but projection. They want to feed you biased propaganda, Soviet style. And they don't want you asking any questions about it. and they want to bring up the next generation, stupid enough for them to just go with the flow. Don't ask any questions. They want those sheep to follow that shepherd right over the cliff.